Welcome to Hey Listen, where we discuss faith, leadership, and the mission of the church. We're so glad you've joined us. Now to today's episode. All right, so part 2 of this conversation, in our first piece, we talked about growing in grace in our gifts and figuring out what those spiritual gifts are to become more effective as a witness in the world. And something that I kept thinking through that first episode that I'd like to share, I heard at a conference about the balance in hard times in ministry versus the good, those things that you see fruit in, and the encouragement side. You know, we talked a lot about voicing encouragement, acting on that, and how important that is. Those times when someone has encouraged me, has given me a note that I can actually tangibly hold on to, or an email, those carry us through the hard times of ministry. And that has challenged me to become an encourager, to act on those things, because I know how valuable it is for me. Ministry is hard, and that is not just for people on staff at a church. We all get to be a part of ministry because we're believers, we're following Jesus. It can be hard because sin, yes. Life is messy. Dealing with people is going to be messy, but that encouragement carries us through those hard times so well.
Yeah, the gifts of the church make the church a more beautiful place. When we are able to contribute our part, again, the body is more healthy and everyone is able to contribute, and yet it's all moving in the same direction. But the reality is, the further we push outside of the comfort zone that is the church, the thing we discover is how difficult it is, how hard ministry really is, how messy sin has caused the world to be. And so in that sense, our gifts, in the most general sense, do encourage the body of Christ because we're doing our part to keep it healthy. But we need to also bring that into a more, I think, laser-like focus to say, yeah, I might be a great teacher, I may be a good servant here or there, but where is that touching directly with a life at the church where I'm encouraging that person? Because if that person is going to get over those hurdles, we're going to talk about some hurdles to evangelism later. If they're going to get over those hurdles, they need the encouragement of the Lord. They need something deep and spiritual and from the Lord, and you can be a vessel of that grace. And so, yes, every time you're encouraging someone, you're making the body of Christ better, but you may also be empowering that person to be a more effective witness.
Absolutely. I shared that a little bit with a couple of our interns who are pursuing ministry. I had a chance, they traveled with us on a mission trip just this summer, and both of them asked me, what is one thing that you would, pass on? That was it, because ministry is hard, but encouragement is important.
Yeah, I mean, here at Ridgecrest, we're constantly having to just support one another. There are some weeks where things don't go well, and we need to just focus on caring for one another. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this conversation says, okay, if we are doing that well and we're able to develop strong spiritual and emotional health in the church, there's a world out there that needs to hear about Jesus. And the Great Commission is an outward projected mission and ministry. Mission, the root word of that is the same one for missile. It means you're going to launch, you're going to go out, right? The first gift that's mentioned in the gift inventories in 1 Corinthians 12, also in Ephesians 4, is apostle. Now, that is a unique gift, and we're not going to talk about whether that's still in the church today or not, but that idea of one being sent out, that shows that the outward posture of the church is crucial, that the gifts and preaching and teaching, prophecy, things of that nature, those things can have an inward angle and focus, but a lot of that is so that we can go out and make a difference in the world. Paul says he says to Titus, we need elders here on Crete, because there's false teachers. We've got to fix this false teaching so that we can reach the Cretans who need the Lord. And the Cretans were known as being kind of untruthful. All Cretans are liars. That was the line. And Paul uses it. And okay, well, if you're going to fix that, you have to be a church on fire to be salt and light in a cultural context that's dark like that. But that's what our gifts do. Our gifts make the body healthy. And then a healthy body then can move. And so the church, when we think about a church, often we think about, okay, brick and mortar, it's a place. Yeah, it is a place, but the church is the people, and the people need to be on mission, and the Great Commission is that mission. But many churches aren't on the Great Commission, and I think it's because their gifts aren't being stirred up. The hard things in life are causing them to be insular, inward focused,
complacent.
Oh,
Just
yes,
sitting.
sitting on the couch, of ministry. There's this whole world out there, and I tell our people all the time, it's kind of like, I hear older people often say, and I've been guilty of it too, you say, oh, the world is such a bad place. Well, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Like you sitting around complaining, watching Fox News, and you can tell me all the bad things that are going on in the world. I get it, but that didn't fix anything. Right. We need people who are solving the problems, not just commenting on them. And so the church is meant to be more than a commentator on cultural chaos. The church is meant to be a difference maker. Again, Jesus talked about the salt and the light, and salt takes something that's just bland and gives it that flavor, right? And the light, go into a dark place, you shine the tiniest light, and it lights up the room, and you can see. Those are the metaphors for the church. So the gifts of the church are meant to bring all these good things into the world. So a church, when it's growing in grace, so it's getting stronger within, because the gifts, our last conversation, our gifts are being implemented and applied. But that's not just for us, Kayla, so that we feel good about our church. Oh, I love my church. We just enjoy going to church. Well, we need to enjoy going to church, and then we need to enjoy taking the message of Jesus out into the world.
Absolutely. So speaking of the world, let's talk our world right here in Springfield. So what does this look like reaching our demographic of Springfield, Missouri?
Yeah, the demographic in Springfield is unique here in the state of Missouri. Missouri is not traditionally part of the Bible Belt, but we see in Missouri a pretty strong evangelical culture. Even up in St. Louis and in northern Missouri, there's a lot of Baptist churches. There's over 1,800 Southern Baptist churches, Missouri Baptist churches in the state of Missouri. But Springfield is a little different than the rest of our state. It is maybe at the top edge of the buckle of the Bible Belt. I like to say it that way. We're not Texas, Georgia, Florida, the big Baptist convention states. We're not like that, but we have some of that flair and flavor here in Springfield. So there's some larger evangelical churches in Springfield, and this town has been known. There was a study done about a decade ago saying that Springfield was like the most evangelical town in America. Now, I don't know if that's still true. Wouldn't surprise me though, because there's some, big churches. And so, yeah, we have a little bit of that, but what I'm seeing is a shift. And because we live in Missouri, we're here in a place where taxes and, buying houses is a little cheaper than East Coast, West Coast. We're seeing a lot of license plates, like in my neighborhood, a lot of license plates from Oregon, from New York, New Jersey. It's unreal. And as you talk with people, you find that they're moving here. So as they move here, they're bringing with them maybe some more of what has been termed a post-Christian worldview. Sure. You and I were talking earlier. I mean, I would not at all consider Springfield a post-Christian cultural context. I think there's still way too much strong evangelical presence here. But the post-Christian element, when you're in New York or Chicago or LA, you feel it. I mean, it's just there, especially when you're in the urban centers of those areas. When I walk around and see shuttered churches or churches that have been turned into nightclubs and bars, which is very common. I remember Jenny and I, last time we were in Manhattan, we went to this pizza place that everybody said we need to go to. And we walked in, and it was an old church, and it was a gorgeous. It had a balcony and everything, and they were serving pizza. And you see that, and part of my heart sinks when I think about that. And so that's that world. And so when you're meeting those individuals, you may start having conversations with them that are more like classic apologetics because they're literally not coming from a Christian background. So for years, you would grow a church in Springfield, Missouri by just being a strong evangelical church. You just did church things, you used church language, and you would draw church people. But now if we want to grow churches in this area more and more, the people who are moving in, we're going to have to be more in tune with worldview, what's going on in politics, how that impacts people, how they think, philosophies that are kind of prevailing, the common wisdom of the day. And so at our church, and just a shout out to Austin Gober, he is one of the best apologists I've met. He's 30 years old. He's got some philosophy background. He is on the campus at MSU with a table talking worldview several times a week. And so that's the kind of, I think, approach we're going to have. If we're going to reach our community moving forward, we're going to have to be willing to have the ability, we have to have the willingness to go out there and some abilities built up. So not everybody in the church is like Austin. Like Austin has a mind for apologetics. So when we find individuals like that, that's where we encourage those gifts and we help them. But the person who doesn't have the gifts of apologetics can certainly be a good neighbor.
Sure.
So, a good friend of mine, David Burton, who's been developing a neighborhood initiative here in this part of the state. The numbers are crazy. Most of us are not being good neighbors. We think being a good neighbor is just hiding and not, like
pull
I
into
didn't
the
play,
garage and close the
That's right.
door.
Yeah, we didn't play loud music and we didn't keep you up last night, so we're a good neighbor.
Put our trash away on time.
A good neighbor like goes over and hangs out, And so you don't have to be an apologist. You just need to be willing to have conversation and build those relationships.
Yeah. So in light of that, why is this so hard? Thinking through things that keep us from being a good neighbor or having good conversations with people that we work with or people at the grocery store. Why is it hard for us?
I think that we assume that whatever gift we have is not good enough, that we forget that there's somebody out there who needs to hear our take on things, our life experiences, maybe something intellectual, maybe we have a certain understanding of history that might be helpful, but most of the time we just need to believe that God is sovereign and the people he's bringing into our sphere of influence we just may have the right thing to say at the right time. So just trust that this is a God thing, not a me or you thing.
Right. And that should bring freedom to us.
Right.
It's not on our shoulders. I mean, we need to share, we need to build relationships, but we don't save people.
No.
We're not the ones that have that power, and that's freeing.
So it is hard to share the gospel like anything else. The devil is going to give us every reason not to do it. Which right there ought to tell you we ought to be doing it more. If the devil's telling you not to do something, then you probably should be doing it. But I think most people, I don't think it's 50-50. I don't think it's 50-50 introverts to extroverts. I think more people are introverted than extroverted. That's why, a leader, a communicator, someone on stage, most people look at that and say, I could never do that or never want to do that. I get it. Believe it or not, I think I probably am on the introvert side. I love being a pastor and preacher of the Word of God. It wears me out. Like I am tired on Sunday afternoons. I don't get charged by a big crowd. It will wear me down over time. I charge up in the study, in the quiet, in reflection. So I think a lot of people would use their introversion as an excuse.
Right.
So they would say, hey, look, the reason why I'm not sharing my faith is because I'm not like Austin. I don't have that ability to just go out and strike up a conversation, or even, I'm socially awkward. My daughter and I, she would talk, oh, I'm so socially awkward. Dad, why do I say this? And, you think about it, how often do you have a conversation with a new person, or you meet somebody and you go home and you're driving and you're like, why did I say that?
That's every conversation for
That's
me.
every conversation for you.
Or at 4:00 in the morning, I'm like replaying it.
Yes.
Why did you say that?
Yes. I think that just because we've had enough of those weird moments, the devil says you're just weird and you don't know how to talk to people and you're going to mess this up. And honestly, I think we just remember that everybody we're interacting with is probably feeling that way too. And I think we need to own that somewhat. Like when we do say something dumb, just, you sometimes you just have to own it. But I want you to think about this. I have known a few people that were really good evangelists and were very good in evangelism. They were extroverts. They were so good. I remember as a kid, we would go out on visitation and just have like these random, knock on doors and just strike up conversations. Yes. Nothing wrong with that. I think the church would be blessed if they did it more, if we did it more. But what I see is extroverts sometimes when it comes to gospel conversations move too fast. And introverts, when it comes to developing those conversations, move too slow. So what we need to do is identify, once again, identify who we are, and then realize we're going to have a weakness on one side of that equation or the other. If we're too extroverted, we may need to slow down the conversation, build relationship before we get to the gospel. On the other side, with introversion, we have to get to the gospel.
Right.
We have to get to a point where we say, hey, this is who Jesus is. I had a conversation recently like that where I had to just really listen, and for such a long time. And then finally, I saw that there was a tiny little opening. I barely had one. It was just a tiny little angle. And I was able to talk about the need for Christ and the cross just in that tiny little angle. And I didn't get to develop it much, but I got to share the gospel for just a few precious seconds. That's the way it is. For me, I've just had to learn that I have to be intentional about getting to that instead of letting it go. I find myself beating myself up more often than not now, not just because of what I said, but what I didn't say.
What you didn't say, absolutely.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yes, missed opportunities. And I think we have to be practicing those things. We need to be looking at resources and tools and studying up so that we're ready to share the gospel. Use things like the 3 circles method that, it starts with, God created this perfect world. Sin entered the world, and we're looking for all of these things. We have this broken world, and then he sent Jesus. Well, you can insert, or you can bring that to any point of a conversation. You can start anywhere on the 3 circles, but we have to know, we have to be prepared to have this conversation. And that's one of so many tools that we can use to share the gospel, but we have to be practicing it. Role play stuff is awkward when we go to a training or kids ministry leadership
I always
stuff.
hate those.
You hate those,
Yep.
But there's some practicality to it.
They help.
Practicing saying those things as a family. Do that as a family, because if we're not practicing it, we're not always ready to do it.
Yeah, another proof that I'm an introvert. Like when we have those meetings and we have to get in a group and do stuff like that. Oh man,
I got a phone call.
Yeah, especially when you're the boss, you're like, well, I have things to do.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it is good, and every time we get a chance to practice, it is worth it. I think another thing that people do though, I think the lack of confidence is probably the number one hurdle. The feelings of insufficiency we have when it comes to sharing the faith. We may be confident in Jesus in the sense that we believe in him and believe we're saved, but the enemy is so good at saying, yeah, but you're no good at sharing.
Right. You don't know enough.
You don't know enough. You're not ready. You're not prepared. You haven't taken an evangelism class in a long time or never at all. Whatever it is, he always has an angle on you, but you just have to push through that. I think that some people probably would say, again, I listen to the voices of people and they're like, oh, the world has just gone so far the wrong direction. There's so much darkness. The culture has shifted, especially here in Springfield when people can say, oh, I remember a time when if a preacher just preached the gospel, the church would grow and you had a lot of big churches and things of that nature. So, things are different. I believe that the cultural shift that we've seen in the last 30, 40 years that I've been paying attention, 30 years I've been paying attention, it looks more and more like the first century. Neo-paganism, just the worldview of, anything kind of goes, the sexual mores of our age, all those things look an awful lot like the first century Greco-Roman world. Now you can, if you know what that is, if you've really read the literature on that, you're going, oh man, that is not good. That's a rough world. But it's the world that the gospel conquered. Like when people are going down those roads, those paths of sensuality and pleasure and the flesh, those are dead ends, literally and figuratively. The gospel is so much better than that. So if we are willing and able, and we're all able, but if we're willing to share the gospel, I think the cultural shifts we've seen actually make the light of the gospel more bright. And we don't have to say anything profound because, listen, what people are trying to do to find happiness is not working. Talk to your therapist friends. They do not have any room on their schedule for anybody else. People are hurting, and there's a reason for that because we're chasing our idols and we're looking for things that are dead end in every way. And so, yeah, I think the cultural challenges are there. I'm not going to pretend like it's not hard when you have somebody that's very thoughtful who is arguing against maybe your view of suffering. You know, why is there suffering in the world if God is strong enough? If he's all powerful, why isn't he strong enough to deal with the war in Ukraine or whatever they choose to throw out? They're good answers for those things. But most people aren't asking those questions. They're just kind of doing their thing and they're not happy about it. Some of them are happy about it, and yet there's just something nagging, something's missing. You know, when you get to the end of your life and you talk to someone has plenty of money, they have a home, they have children that are healthy, and maybe grandchildren, and yet they're still not happy, you say, okay, what's going on there?
Right.
You know, I think that's where the Lord is at work and calling that person to something that is beyond this world.
Right. So thinking about the Lord at work, let's look at Jesus's example on this. How did Jesus minister well?
Yes. You know, the thing that we need to remember when we're sharing the faith is we approach this humbly, and we're speaking to sinners, but we ourselves are sinners. And Jesus was sinless, and yet when he describes his own heart and his approach to ministry, he describes it as gentle and lowly. Love a little book by Dane Ortlund that I highly recommend. I think I bought it for my kids for Christmas 2 Christmases ago. A couple other books he's written are wonderful, but he talks about Jesus's only time. The only time Jesus describes his heart is in Matthew 11. And let me just read that to you. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." It's Matthew 11, 28 and 29. I love these two verses because I think when Jesus is practicing evangelism here, and you know, we say, "Come to Jesus," and Jesus says, "Come to me." So when he says, "Come to me," he admits that life is hard,
Right.
that you are laboring, that you are heavy laden, burdened down by the cares of the world. Don't you want rest? And so, like I said a moment ago, I think the busyness of our culture, the technology that causes us to be just constantly having to pay attention to email, text messages, keeping up with this and keeping up with that, watching what's going on in the world. Oh my gosh, in real time, well, look what happened today. It just drives us nuts. And then we hear this voice, this calm, assuring voice saying, "Come to me, come to me." Get away from all of that and find rest. So Jesus's example, I think the church needs to be more of a place of Sabbath and rest where we're working hard for Jesus, but we're doing that in a way where we're communicating this gentle and lowly spirit of Jesus. So I think that's a key there is the example of Jesus. We don't see, he does do some of his preaching is pretty strong. He's going to talk about hellfire from time to time, but most of his witnessing, as it were, is that gentle and lowly spirit. And so we need to remember that. And we've seen a lot of evangelistic approaches that are not very gentle. And I saw that growing up, and I saw a lot of evangelism that was well-meaning, but of very little effect because it was just so harsh.
Right.
And I think that Jesus would teach us that we can come at people with a more gentle spirit.
Yeah. And I think part of that is sharing our story, being vulnerable, to share our story or our testimony. You know, that's something we in our starting point for kids, our new believers class, we ask them to share their testimony, to think about what led to them making a salvation decision, and what that looked like, and then how their life has changed, which is really funny for a 7-year-old. I used to be really mean to my brother and sister, and now I'm not quite as mean to my brother and sister. But as we share our testimony, we want to make sure that we're weaving in what God has done. It's not just the things I did, in that process, but making sure that we are sharing what God has done in our life. We recently had an opportunity to follow up on our preteen mission trip, and on the fly, I asked one of our preteens, without any warning, and just said, "Hey, will you share your testimony?" And he did. He stepped up. He shared his testimony. But what I loved was that he wove the gospel into it. In kids ministry, we teach the ABCs of becoming a Christian. He wove that into his story. And I thought that was so powerful. Now, he did that because that's what we've trained them to do, that he's practiced that. He was ready on the fly, and any of them would have been, but he shared the gospel. He took them to Jesus, not just about his story and his call.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're not saying it, but that young man was your son, and we're proud of him, and he has such a sweet spirit, and man, that's just rich, because we talk about our story. So we want to share our story, because even a lost culture says, okay, your story matters. I want to, you have a right to your story. Right. But the Christian story, who's the hero?
Jesus.
That's right. So if you listen to some testimonies, the hero is the person. They're telling the story like we tell stories.
I overcame it all.
Right. That is not true. Jesus overcomes sin. We do not. So when we share our testimony, it's still about Jesus. But at the same time, I think that one of the ways to get people to be a little less offended or whatever, is to think about the power of story. So, practically speaking, then, when we talk about evangelism, let's just bring this home. Like, we want believers, as a part of their discipleship in the church, is to work on their testimony. So think of a way where if you only have a minute to share it, what does that look like?
Right.
If you're having coffee and you have a more extended period of time and you can share that, well, think through how you would tell that story. And so we would just say, those God moments are going to come. Are you ready for it?
Right. And are you asking God for them?
Yes.
Are you seeking the Lord, saying, God, put people in my path and help me be ready to share what you have for them? I also think, we talked a little bit earlier about that relational side. We have to be listening and not just speaking. The phrase of we listen to respond, because we're constantly listening, but what am I going to say next? And we want to be prepared. We want all of those things, but we need to listen to their story to help, and just take that time to be praying through it, how God would have you respond.
Yeah, one of the authors that I think is maybe the best, for me anyway, is an apologist, Francis Schaeffer. I've read most of his works. He's just a brilliant thinker, but he was a great evangelist, and he used art and philosophy to do that. And I think we may have talked about him in other podcasts, but Schaeffer would say if he had 60 minutes to share the gospel, he would listen for 50 minutes and talk and share the gospel actually for 10. And I just think that is it. Whatever the number ends up being, I think there needs to be a majority listening. And so often we don't know the right pace to share the gospel, because we're not listening. And I think we'll get that, regardless if we're an extrovert or an introvert. One of the ways to mitigate the weaknesses of either of those is to just be a good listener. Yeah. It's always good. And so I just would ask everybody that's watching this, if you're a believer in Christ, I think it's important that this week you ask God in your prayers to help you be a better witness, to take the gifts that you've been given and ask the Lord to make you a better witness, to give you those opportunities, and to be intentional. There are people that you're going to come in contact with in the next few days that need your witness, and you'll either see it or you won't. And so make sure that you're spiritually prayed up and prepared, so that when the moment comes, you can share a good word and maybe, who knows, see someone come to know Jesus.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Hey Listen.